Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us at a live stream at the Sunset Park podcast. Tonight, I am your host, I'm Anna Maria Aguilar, and I'm joined by my co host, Paulette, and I'm also joined by two candidates that are running for CC. So tonight we're going to be talking about what is a CC, what do they do for your school community, and also how to vote for them tomorrow, because tomorrow is where you get a chance to vote. So welcome Tamara and welcome Selenia.
Hi, thank you for having us here.
Hi, thanks. Same thing. So yes,
So, first of all, I want to start with what is a CC? Who can answer that for me?
Well, I could probably take that on. I presently sit on the Citywide Council on Special Education, and if anyone is coming into New York from another state or city, or even if they're coming in from upstate New York or Long Island or anywhere from the suburbs, our CECs and Citywide Councils are the equivalent of what was used to known as the school board. And a school board is a council of elected officials that make policy, contract, and programming decisions for the districts that they reside over. So if you were living in Long Island and you lived in Suffolk County would have their own school board. The equivalent to that in New York City would be your Community Education Council, which is what CEC stands for all the 32 districts that resonate inside New York City. So I see Selenia is from District 13 in Brooklyn. Tamara, who I know personally, it lives in District 20 in Bay Ridge. And I personally live in District 20 as well, and sitting on the Citywide Council. The Citywide Councils oversee all 1,600 schools in New York City within the special subgroups within the DOE. So the Citywide Council for Special Education represents the 250,000 children with IEPs enrolled in our public schools right now. There's also a citywide council for District 75, which is a specific program for children with either multiple or developmental disabilities. They have their own citywide council as well. And there is also a citywide council for English language learners, ELLs or MLLs. And there is an entire citywide council for high schools that is divided up by borough. So lots of different governing bodies. And I know that with the elections coming up, there are a ton of different questions about what the responsibilities are. What are these community-based councils obligated to do? What are their direct connections with the communities that they serve? How can they facilitate better supports for the schools? So I think that's kind of why we're here, and we're having this conversation, and hopefully we can teach some of our listeners that are out there today a little bit more about how local community councils work.
Thank you, Paulette. So, I also want to mention that tomorrow we're going to make history in how we vote. Before, we only PTA presidents were able to vote for a CC candidate, right? And tomorrow, all parents are able to vote, and all you need is a My Students account, right? So that's
Yeah,
exciting. Mhm.
because it's already an accessible program for many parents because that's where you would access report cards, you can access your child's IEP, their transportation, their attendance, test scores, even health. Like so it's a really vital tool. So it's cool that they're implementing the voting within that system because then you know, it helps parents like find out that, oh wow, this is actually a really beneficial program that I could log in and keep track of my child's academic whatever is going on in school. And it'll push more people to sign up, and it's easier, especially during times like this, that it gives parents access to easily vote rather than physically going to polls and stuff like that. So I'm excited because I feel like it's going to be a big turnout because of how easily accessible it is.
But it's also, is it accessible for everyone? Because I feel that sometimes like immigrant communities don't have that same, it's not as accessible to them because of, how they log in, or is there parent coordinators that are teaching them or helping them, or workshops on how to navigate in my
Mm-hmm.
students?
I I know that there's other ways besides creating the New York parent account. I know that you can. I had put up some resources for parents because I know that that is probably like one of the tough parts about it, because there are people that unfortunately like don't have easy access to computers and internet access and everything like that. And there's also different choices that you can go and vote besides doing that. They can contact their school, and the schools are obligated to give parents access to a public computer, and also their district offices too. They're offering places for parents to come and get help to create the account and put their vote in. Also, if parents call 311 and like tell them, hey, I want to vote for the for the education council, and I don't have internet access, and it's hard for me to contact the school, they can also give you public places where there are computer accessible that you can go and vote. And also, there's actually still paper ballots available to vote. It's a little difficult, but you would have to go to like the superintendent's offices, and the people who are there, they'll help create the account for the parents, and they'll put in their vote for them. So, some people feel comfortable doing stuff in person rather than doing things online. And, some people prefer to have someone like guiding them through. So, and that's one thing I feel like a lot of parents didn't know that these options were available, because for example, they mailed out flyers and everything within the past few weeks about the election, but I didn't notice anything like thoroughly explaining, or at least like basically explaining, different options to vote rather than just depending on using the online account.
I actually have to agree. That's a lot of the stuff that you just said is information that I did not know. You know what I mean? And if I didn't know it, I'm a very active parent leader in this community. And we've been trying to find ways to, disseminate the information to a lot of people. And I feel it's really annoying to now find it out. And it's April 30th. And, the voting starts tomorrow. So, and one of the main concerns that a lot of parents have been having is just getting internet access. That's been the main concern for a lot of people because, they don't have, proper internet access where they live, because there's families that we know in our district that are going to McDonald's or Chipotle to use the internet access because they're not getting broadband where they live, or they can't afford it because of everything that's going on with the pandemic. They've lost their jobs. It's just so hard. So I just find it so strange that, you know, there are still paper ballot and you could go to the school, but a lot of schools don't even have computers readily available for you to access because most of the kids are using laptops.
It's true. And I just feel like for this being the first time that parents can actually vote for their council members, I wish that they would have, you know, brought it to light more about the other options. And I guess maybe they did that because like they want to push, families to get these, to make their accounts, but then, you know, what about the homeless students? There is a huge statistic of homeless students that, are constantly moving around and don't have a permanent place. Who knows if they have access to internet there? And even then, a lot of the documentation that's needed to create the portal, you need to get a special code from the parent coordinator at your child's school. So then it's difficult because, a lot of people are still working remotely at home and prefer emailing rather than calling. So like you can call the school and the phones are off because there's technically no one in the building. I mean, now since they're slowly opening up, there are more people, but it's still limited. So the chances of really getting that information out there is a little difficult because everything's just been limited for so long now. So I felt like I wish they would have like made that known more, like, hey, there are more options to vote rather than just doing it on the New York student account.
Right, because this is the first time I've heard about it. And that's quite
Mm-hmm.
concerning because I'm a PT president. So I had a workshop. So it would have been nice to have all these resources for our families to know because it really is important and they can really make an impact. Like, they have a right to vote. And I just wish they would know how to exercise that right to vote so they can get the right candidate for their school community, because it's so important to get the right candidate, because as a CC member you are also you're choosing a liaison for your school, someone that comes
Mm-hmm.
in and that can work with you as a parent to see the issues that are going in your school. There are maybe issues that are impacting children and parents, and maybe principals are not addressing it. But when you have a support, which is what a CC member is there for, to support you, then that can change.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really and how did you get the information? Because I know like Tamara and we're all very like active, so
Mm-hmm.
we're surprised that we didn't have that information.
Yeah, I was just like Googling away. Like I spoke to someone at my son's school because I was just curious to know, like, are there other ways that people can vote? Because I know there's people out there that are like, nope, I'm not good with technology and everything like that. Me personally, I like writing. It's just like I went because I just wanted to look for accommodations, like other ways to help people vote, because then it'll boost the polls. Like it'll be I want it to be a good turnout, so then the DOE could see like, hey, we should keep this going. And then maybe in the future they can make like a specific portal just for voting that is easy, like like a Google form, like you type it, and everything, and has all the candidates you pick, like a electronic ballot. Like I'm curious to see how it looks tomorrow. Honestly, like I want to see how that layout is, and I'm hoping it's not anything too difficult. Like I don't want to undermine parents because the parents that are going out there and voting, they're obviously aware of what's going on in their child's like academic, in schools. But then I want to be able to show those parents that really aren't familiar with all of the school, extracurricular stuff that goes on in their kids' school, because a lot of the times parents just take their kids to school and just want them to do good and get good grades and then come home, and then the school year ends, summer's here, but I want parents to know that, like, if you were to go in there and put your nose into the business of what your school is doing, you can do a lot. Like And that's why I feel like these seats are important, because we're kind of like building the bridge between parents and like the administration, and like tell that like we're representing them. So we're here like, these are what the parents want. Like these are what the parents are asking for. These are what the parents are concerned about. And since we're like, God willing, if we're granted these seats, it's like we're gonna voice that for them, because sometimes parents don't get the opportunity to do that at all, because
Right.
there's just so much going on.
Selenia, and there's, every district has different issues. What's an
Mm-hmm.
issue in District 13 that you want to address?
Um, in District 13, one of the one of the main things that I was really, focusing on was the ratio of homelessness, of homeless students in District 13. Um, there is pretty much like, it's one of the highest rates, I believe. I From when I was looking at the statistics of like how many children are homeless or doubled up in temporary housing and stuff like that, versus kids that are in permanent homes. And just addressing how hard it is for these students to excel academically. A lot of these students still have to deal with the norms of being in school, being a kid in school, um, socializing with peers, trying to get good grades, but then have that abnormal setting of not having a home, and being and not having foundation. And what when I and then digging deeper in that, the kids within that group who needs special education services, because regardless, homeless or not, if you have a disability, or if you're a neurodiverse child who needs services to help them, just to help them get along within their education, it's going to be impossible, because you need documentation, you need referrals, you need, the support that unfortunately homeless children are not going to have, because they're in an unstable environment, and that's like one things, because like one of the criteria that stood out was that I believe it's like 1 in 3 single mothers in District 13 that have a child in District 13 are homeless. So you could imagine, out of all of the children from grade level pre-K to 12, if 1 out of 3 um, single mother family homes are homeless, then could you imagine? A lot of things are being not a lot of things are not being addressed for their child, and in order for them to get out of poverty, in order for them to get to a point where they can, you know, get ahead and get out of it and get out of homelessness. And I just feel that District 13 should start focusing on that more, trying to build connections, whether it's with federal, state, or local community programs that their aim is to aid children and their families out of poverty and homelessness, especially since this is a statistic that's affecting many Black, Brown, Indigenous, Asian, and Spanish, many minority students. And because of language barriers and because of other, reasons, they're completely underserved. Then chances of them dropping out by the time they get to high school, the chance, and they're constantly being moved. They're constantly moving schools. They're transferring out because one shelter, their time is up there. They have to move to the shelter, and a lot of shelters, you know,
And there's a lot of, and I'm
yeah,
sorry, and there's a lot
oh
of
yeah,
families that already feel like immigrant in our immigrant community, and like you said, Latinx community, Black and Brown communities, they feel like this system did not have them in mind. Like
oh
Mhm.
they,
yeah.
so Tamara, the same question to you. Different districts have different issues. What is an issue that you would like to address in District 20?
I would like to address, we also have a number of kids in this district. This district is thought of like, supposedly one of the best districts, but we do actually have a number of kids living in shelters here also. You know what I mean? There's a number, and they start off going to school here, and the shelter that they're in might be full, so that they can move to wherever there's available space. So then they end up coming from, say, like the Bronx or Harlem to Bay Ridge, just for school. And it takes them a long time to get here. They have their own traumas that they're going through as well, and it's just to that, on top of the pandemic, on top of not having the resources that they need, and then just the anxiety of trying to be good students. It's very hard. And same, I feel like we have a lot of similar issues. The same thing as translations. A lot of our immigrant community feels like the district, it might not even be the district, the DOE in general is not really there to help them. You know what I mean? Because it seems like they find out things like in piecemeal. Like they don't find it out, like the English speakers. And a lot of times by the time you get it translated, they find out like a month later. And then, and then the information is really, I don't know if it's needed then, because when they did need it, they didn't get the information. So it's also same thing, special education. We have a number of kids in this district that are not getting the services that they need, period. Like I've spoken to parents that since last March they still haven't gotten services. So like you already know that your kid, you know is having a hard time, dealing with school on a regular basis, on top of their IEP, on top of whatever services they need, and they're not getting it, which is, and a lot of time that service that they need is what helps them to become good students, because at this point in time, with everything that's going on, we just want our kids to pass. You know what I mean? We just want our kids just to pass. We don't care how they pass. We just want them to pass, because it's like we're all dealing with the same issues. We all have anxiety. We all are just taking it day by day. And I feel like by the time June comes, I don't even know what to expect for next year. I don't even know what to prepare for, honestly, because I'm just trying to get my kid through this year.
Right. And I have to agree, like, during this pandemic, we have really seen the disparities in our communities. Like when they said, okay, let's have all the children do remote learning, they did not consider our homeless children that did not have Wi-Fi, did not have access to a device, that did not have a home to actually a space for them to be part of remote learning or to have that space to listen to their teachers. I mean, there's so many disparities that we were able to see, and also we were able to see more of the issues that were happening um, with the system. So is there something that you both can think of that has really been an issue that has popped out and you're like, wow, like I need to really work on something to help families with that?
I guess for me, I feel like they need resources. You know what I mean? They need to know where they can get, you know, food from the pantry. They need to know where they can get, medical care, health care, things like that. That many people are not able to receive anymore because like they're unemployed. Their job has become literally non-existent. Their companies is basically become non-existent. And I feel like we need to be working within our own community to see what our community needs. And then that's why, I have been, one of the things that I've been very grateful that I've been able to do is, talking to our elected officials to let them know what we need in our district, because maybe you don't know what's going on, because I feel like some of our elected officials, some of them might not have children, so they don't understand where we're coming from as parents in education. So it sometimes helps to give them a different perspective, so they can be like, oh, okay, because I don't have the kid, like that wasn't even something that I was thinking about. You know what I mean? And I think once you get your elected officials to step up and help your community, then you could do it community by community. And then you could get everybody together, helping each other, because that's really what we need. We don't
Right.
need anybody coming up and telling us what to do. We need you to help us.
And it's important for families to know that they have that support. Like if they're not getting the support from their schools or from their district, that they have the support from their elected officials, from their local elected officials. So I think that's very important, especially to start forming those relationships so they can have these communications, so they can start engaging with what they really need. I mean, I think a lot of our families are tired of hearing what they think we need. Let them know from us, from we need to amplify the voices. We need to let them know what our children need because we're the parents and we know firsthand what our children need. And I think that's so important, especially during um, 4 years of an administration that we totally felt disconnected with. So it's so important to have that connection again, especially with local elected officials.
I think it's also important to highlight that, with the shelter in because of COVID, not only were disparities more apparent amongst our more disenfranchised communities, but within the communities themselves, every school landscape in terms of how they engaged their parents was different, school to school. You had administrators that were moving heaven and earth to try to reach parents because they knew that they lived in precarious situations, and then you had administrators you couldn't even reach, no matter how hard you tried. Same thing that goes with the parent coordinators and the PTAs. It's like whoever is in those seats, that they shoulder that responsibility of really like reaching out to the community, getting a beat on what their concerns are, and bringing it back to people who can actually make a difference. That all depended on who that person was, right? It wasn't necessarily like unilaterally supported throughout the schools per district, let alone across the city. So I think that's something that is a challenge in all of our districts. And I know that Anna had spoken to it briefly in terms of like what we're seeing equity wise across our schools. But do either of you have an opinion on what you're seeing in your district, in terms of like local disparities from school to school?
And I would just feel like when it comes to this situation, it's like the effect that it has on the mental health of these students. They struggle with a lot of mental and emotional, with a lot of issues with their mental and emotional health. Um, the state of being homeless, it leads to anxiety, it can lead to depression, it leads to low self-esteem. And these are all things that will diminish their academic ability. So it's like there's it's still very stigmatized. A lot of these students are afraid to ask for help. Um, you know, they suffer from the stigma and then they result in like being secretive about their situation privately, being homeless, and then they'll keep this inside. And then at the end of the day, it's like as much as we try to, let these parents know, hey, there's this, you can go here to get this kind of service and you can go here to get this kind of service. But then when they get there, it's exhausting. And then at the end of the day, they're just like, all of this trouble, when I ask for help, then I'm not going to ask for help. And um, then it keeps them isolated. And then the students in particular, like they'll isolate themselves from their peers, and like even worse, like some of these students are at risk of being bullied more because of their social status, like where they are, because it's you know they just feel like they're not, it's just messed up to say, but it's just like they feel like they don't even belong there.
Mhm.
And it's messed up because no kid should ever feel like that when they're in school. Like, just like equal opportunity employers, it's equal opportunity in schools for every single child. And sometimes, well, the majority of the time, it's not like that, because I've seen it firsthand. You know, like when parents are more involved within their school community, you notice that their kids are more proactive in a lot of the extracurricular activities and programs and everything that's done in schools. And then children that are in poverty, they're kind of shadowed, like, to the side, because you know there's too much going on in their life to even think about this. And they're
And I think and I think
yeah,
that's like our main goal, right? To have our schools
mhm,
being equitable. And I think
mhm,
that's like so difficult because and it shouldn't be difficult, right? It should be a
mhm.
every child should deserves an opportunity for a great education. But why is that so difficult when it shouldn't
I'm
be?
Yeah, the
Yeah.
reason it's so difficult is because the resources go to the high achieving schools and not the schools that have the most need. That's why it's so difficult, and that has been made incredibly apparent during the shelter in. It's like those students that were not struggling in remote learning. Those were schools that had iPads that they were able to give out immediately. Those were schools that received devices way before some of our schools that had a higher need. We have schools within the district that we live in that are still waiting, and it's been over a year and a half. And that's ridiculous in the span of time where we are on the brink of having a huge influx of money coming into our New York City schools for the first time in 30 years because of a lawsuit that finally the decision came down on. So all the things that are supposed to be funded in our school budget, such as a liaison for our students in transitional housing, those have not been staffed. They may assign it to, say, like a social studies teacher because she doesn't have a particular class she oversees, and that is not equitable. That is not true support.
But Paulette,
So.
this is what I
Mhm,
find interesting
mhm.
that children with IEPs, when you have a child that's enrolled in a school and a child with IEP, they actually get money. The school gets more money for a child with IEPs. But these are the children that are mostly underserved. Like right now during the pandemic, there was a whole big issue. Please talk to us about that.
Well, I mean, it's a compliance issue, right? I mean, the services that are mandated on a child's individual educational plan is designed to support that child's individual needs, and that is regulated by not only state law but federal law. So there has to be compliance in terms of rolling out these services, rolling out the proper setting, making sure that an annual IEP meeting is happening. The problem is the way, one, the IEP team reads the IEP, and two, the implementation of it. Because according to the DOE regulations, if a child is mandated for speech services 3 times a week, for the entire school year, and the speech therapist meets that child once and enters it into CESIS, which is the data capturing program that the DOE uses to catalog whether a child is receiving services or not. And then that speech therapist is diverted to a different school, and that speech therapist is not replaced with a new speech therapist. In the eyes of the DOE, that is considered compliance. You service that child once, and that is sufficient. And we all know, as parents who have children with special needs, that that is no way sufficient to supporting that child's needs. And that is just one example of many, many other examples that we have seen in terms of talking to parents, in terms of reports that have been given to us, in terms of reports actually generated from the DOE and from our state controller. District 20 itself has been one of the worst. And during COVID, um, prior to COVID, we were at 38% compliance rate out of 100. And during a COVID year, when we were all sheltered in and we were all getting remote services, in-person related services didn't happen until the summer. All of a sudden, we went from 37% compliance to 90% compliance during a COVID year.
Hmm.
Does that sound kosher?
Mm-mm.
Sounds like manipulation of data to me. So those of us who have been on the ground and have been advocating for a long time, we kind of dive into this data, and we can kind of read it as if we were reading like a suspense novel, because we know that the climax is coming. And we've been working very, very diligently with the special education office to highlight areas of suspicion and figuring out ways to really drill down and making sure that the actual plans that are crafted for our children are actually being implemented on the school level. And we understand the challenges. It's like it's remote. We're all in remote. How are we going to be able to provide OT, from a laptop? We figure it out. And if we can't figure out how to do it productively, then we need to make sure that we give our parents waivers so that they can get it done at a private facility, because technically that is theft of service. That child did not receive the services they were mandated, and the school was not able to provide it. If they continue to not provide it, that is considered theft of service.
Tamara, and talking about those people out in like you've been advocating for our families for a very long time. You've been advocating for your child just to get the proper services. I mean, how did that start? Like how tell us a little bit more about your
My
about the fight.
struggle, my
Yes,
struggle,
yes.
my struggle. Oh God, it's like it was when I tell you it was a struggle, it was a struggle, and it it's a struggle still now, with because my kid's remote. So my kid gets services remotely. So I have to make sure that when they're getting the services that they're in an area where there's no, there's no distractions and stuff like that, which is kind of hard because I have like 3 kids in remote right now. So, and we're all living together. It's not like, I'm living upstairs, they're living in the basement. You know what I mean? And it's just like I had to I when my daughter started, and we started services at 3, just like, early childhood services. And then, I went through 5, speech therapists that my kid did not take to whatsoever. Even to the point where like the DOE tried to provide me with a speech therapist, and I kept waiting and I kept waiting, and I would call, and they were like, "Yeah, somebody's going to contact you," and like I never heard anything back. So then I took it upon myself. I'm like, I'm not waiting for you guys. My kid needs these services, and I know my kid needs help. So I found my own speech therapist that actually diagnosed my child, that actually put me on the path to finding the proper help for my child. And then the DOE was like, no, 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 we don't want to pay them. We'd rather pay somebody under our umbrella. And I'm like, but you guys haven't contacted me in like 6 months. So I don't know what you're talking about. So like it got to the point where like I fought them, and I won, because when we went to in front of a judge, the person that was representing DOE was like an hour and a half late. We got there on time. Me and my husband, we got there on time to fight for the services, to keep the speech therapist that actually when I tell you made strides. My kid would not shut up now. You know what I mean? And like I'm so ecstatic for that. But and it's still a constant struggle, just fighting for like every school we go to, we have to get, I try to have her evaluated because I want to make sure that she where she needs to be. But it does get very irritating when you enter new spaces, and then the psychiatrist meet your kid for the first time and basically want to tell you what your kid needs when they met them for 10 minutes. You know what I mean? I'm sorry. I've been going through this struggle since they were 3. I really know. I've been to like every meeting. I've spoken to every teacher. Like my kid has done every after school, every Saturday academy. Like you know what I mean? I've done like everything, every service that I was able to get for my child. I went ahead and I got it because I knew that these services would help her, and it really did. She did really well. But again, every new environment is a struggle because as she gets older, she's learning more. Everything becomes complex, so now she has to figure out a way how to take the complexity of what she's now learning and add it to the repertoire that she already has. And it starts off as a struggle, and then she finds her feet. But it's hard. It's hard to see your kid sitting there trying to understand something, and they're thinking that they're stupid or they're dumb, and you're like, no, you're not. You just learn differently than another kid, and every kid is different. It has nothing to do with you. We just got to figure out a way where it's easy for you to understand it and take off with it, and that's really all you got to do.
And I think that's what the important is. The important is of having the right person join you in the struggle that's going to fight for you. So that's why it's so important to vote for the right candidate and not just someone that is looking to the title, because we have a lot of members that just want that title or that just want to advocate for their child. As long as their child is okay, nothing matters. That's all they care about. And we need someone that advocates for all our children, because when you're a parent leader, you have to advocate, and you have to want to advocate for all the children, and you have to actually love your community and want to make a difference in your community. It's not just about having that title or just advocating for what your personal needs are or what your agenda is. So I just want to make sure that when parents vote, even for a PTA president, CC, they have to understand that you are choosing a parent leader that has the power to really make a difference in your school community.
And
And
those of you,
what? Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
no, I was just going to say, and those of you who are running, it's like, I want to make you aware. And Tamara, I mean, this is like gospel to you, but sitting on these councils in order to be in order to be as effective as you possibly can takes a lot of work, a lot of time, and a lot of determination. Because we've seen councils across the city that do not work together, that are at odds, that are constantly not listening to each other, and therefore not listening to the community. And then we have councils that work harmoniously together, and when they work together diligently, visiting the schools, talking to the community, talking to elected officials in order to like combine and build collaboration, it's amazing the things that come out of there. I mean, the CCSC alone, we passed legislation in order to grant our students that were 21 that were aging out of our system an additional year of services, because we worked together and we reached out to other advocacy groups to partner up, and we went to the state and we lobbied for it and we got it. And we did it again this year and we got it again. And
Oh,
that
that's so cool. I
and
want to
that's
get in there.
we want you on. If
I
I
want.
I was actually, like, quite honestly, I was actually incredibly impressed by your candidate for him, Selenia, and I
Oh,
was
thank
rooting for you.
you.
I was
I
just like,
watched
yeah,
it.
go talk about
I
that
was so nervous.
neurodiversity.
Yeah, and I was like, right now, like Tamara, like you hit my heartstrings because I am a early intervention mom and stuff. So it's like being an advocate for your child. No one teaches you that. Like you have to figure everything out on your own, and it's like you know what service, like you'll know what services your child needs. I'm not an expert. I'm not a physician. I'm not a therapist, an ABA therapist. I'm not an occupation, you know, like, but when you're in tune with your child and their needs, it's like I fought for them to give my son services. He's on the spectrum, and like I have twins. Um, they were born prematurely, and my my son started regressing in development at 11 months, which like his chronological, so his adjusted age, he should have been, you know, like a 9 month old, but he wasn't even hitting a 6 month old milestones, and it was, you know, it was obvious the regression in development, and just navigating the whole early intervention system was not even like it was so confusing. And it was down to like when I was filling out the paperwork, there's like this small box that is like, check here if check here if you pretty much want the city to pay for it and we won't bill your insurance. But they won't tell you that because of course the city wants to charge your insurance first, but then a lot of parents don't know that they have limitations to the amount of like the frequency and the duration of their kids services. So then a lot of kids, they end up getting underserved. And so many times like I've had, you know, the IFSP meetings, they just never wanted to give the service. Like I feel like it's easier to take away than give. I mean, it's easier to take away than give. So let's give the service. I mean, well, is it the other way around? But you know what I mean. You give the services. If it's too much for your kid, little by little, you take it away. I was there. They were like, I was like, it's regulated by law that a child gets 20 hours of ABA therapy at minimum for a child who's diagnosed with ASD. The district official literally argued with me saying that I was trying to push my child too hard. And I'm just like, how do we even know if he didn't even start the service yet? Let's try 20 hours. And long and behold, he's been doing 20 hours of ABA therapy for over almost a year now. And he's made substantial, you know, progress. But it's like, what if I was the parent that was just like, okay, I guess we'll just do that. That's my kid getting, you know, that's my kid being underserved. And the the thing that was difficult was the moment that my son was first approved for his services, that's when COVID happened. So a lot of these services that were supposed to be done in person had to be cut to remote. And my son personally, remote does not work. It doesn't, because he has he needs that sensory input. He needs that he needs in person. And I had to fight, and I'm still fighting because I still can't find a speech therapist that can come to my home. You know, he's getting his OT, he's getting his PT at home. Um, I had to fight to increase services, but then the moment I start throwing impartial hearing, start saying impartial hearing around, that's when they're like, oh, okay, okay. So it's like, why do I have to do that? Like, you guys are not putting these children in, like, you're not getting the best interest for these kids. It's, you guys have the money. You know it's there. The funding is there. The programs are there. And sometimes it's like I talk to these district officials and I'm just like, is the money coming out of your pocket directly? Like, why are you fighting for services, for my son to not get specific services? And then if he falls behind in school, then he's going to be another statistic of a child who is um, not performing well, when it was just because that he didn't get a chance. From the first 3 years of a child's life is the most, 0 to 3. That's the first, those years are the most important years. That's when they start, their brains are on overdrive, grasping everything. So when there is a child like my son who has autism, or you know, children that have, for example, a child who has oppositional defiance disorder, they go to school and they're just known as, you know, these bad kids that don't behave. They don't want to follow directions or anything like that. And instead of sitting there and trying to address it in a light where maybe we should do things to help him or her, you know, excel, they'll just be suspended, or they'll be removed from the school, they'll be transferred out. And
Right.
then
And
what ends up happening? They
right.
end
And
up
then
going
they
to the
become
school.
like a problem, but they're not the problem. The
They're
problem
not.
is that the system is not, it's making them a problem when they can really address it and help them, right? So, Selenia, you made a great point. You said that, you advocated for your child, but there are parents, especially again, our immigrant families and undocumented families that don't know about the resources that they can get for their children. And sometimes they allow the system, in many cases, they believe that the system cares, right? And they let them pretty much control what their children needs because they're afraid to speak up, they're not sure about the resources, and sometimes when they do advocate, they're not as successful as maybe we are, right? So I think that's a big issue in having also someone that advocates for all the children and have all the children's needs and take that into consideration. Again, someone that cares. So I just want to address the importance of voting for the right CEC member because, like Paulette had mentioned, there are CECs that always have disagreements that silence the voices of parents. And, firsthand, I've seen that. And I think it's a real, I mean, first of all, I get disgusted by it because parents should never be silenced. And Tamara, you're one of those parents that truly advocates and does not allow to get silence. So, and I know you're going to continue advocating for families.
I no no I actually I believe that, because I am part of the PTA, and I've been for like a number of years in different schools. And like I was the kind of person that was like I wasn't even doing it for my kid. I'm like, my kid's fine. I could get it for them later. You know what I mean? We're good. I'm like, but what about the other kids?
Mhm.
That's how I always saw it. What about the other kids? I'm like, I'm not worried about my kid, because I could handle me and my family could handle my kid or my kids and any issues that crop up. We're good, and we got that. I was like, but my concern has always been for like, but what about the other kids? What are the other kids not getting? It got to the point where like in one of the schools that I was a part of, we had like vision kids, and like one time, actually a few times, they know me very well. Like I would go up to the classroom. I'm like, we have a certain amount of money put away designated to do this and this and this. Is there something that you guys are interested in doing for your vision kids that we could just make happen? As long as you're able to get us the information and we're able to discuss it, and then we could vote on it if there's something that we could do for you guys, do you need help with anything? And they were surprised because they were like, nobody's actually asked them that. And I was like, are you really? I'm like, but you guys are part of our school. And they were like, they felt like they weren't treated as part of the school, which I found out was weird because I always, I guess it's just me then. I was like, but I always counted them as part of the school because your kid's in the same school as my kid. If we're doing events for for all the kids in the school, it should be for all the kids in the school, whether you have a sensory issue or not, whether you know what I mean. We'll find something that can work for kids that needed to be worked for. You know what I mean? That's the whole point. You know what I mean? No kid, they have the whole thing was like no kid left behind. Yeah, no kid left behind with anything. Period. And I feel like that everybody's not like that. I feel like a lot of people get into these spaces because they're using it as a platform to get somewhere. And I'm like, listen, I'm just trying to survive day to day. I'm just trying to make sure that my kids, be raised with the values and become, great human beings. Because, when it comes down to it, all our kids are going to be adults together. You know what I mean? They have to be able to work together. They have to be able to rely on each other in this society. They might not meet each other, but like you want to know that if something happens to your kid can have an ally somewhere else. And I feel like a lot of people don't care for that. They just want to get what they want for their kid, and once their kid gets that, and then that's it, and they're done. And it shouldn't be like that.
I think what Tamara is saying is actually like a shining example of how one person can kind of change the entire um, approach of how a council interacts with their community, right? Whether you're on a CEC, whether you're on an SLT, whether you're in your parent groups, it's amazing how just one person can start that conversation that has never been started and start changing and pivoting towards a more inclusive approach to parent engagement. Whether it's, I mean, the example that Tamara gave can be applied to any PTA. It could be applied to any CEC. It could be applied to any SLT. It takes that one person to ask, well, why are we not talking about the rest of our children? Why are we only focusing on this small group or this one individual child? That is not the purpose of parent leadership. Parent leadership is there to empower other parents to fight for their child as much as you're fighting for all of the children. And that's why this vote is so incredibly important. And we need our parents who are eligible to vote to, launch those NICSA accounts. If you don't have that device, contact your district superintendent. There was actually an email that was sent out by Deputy Chancellor Adrian Austin, who oversees the Family and Community Engagement Department of the DOE, that lists actually three specific sites within each borough where people can actually go in person to file their votes. And I can share that with Anna. I'll email it over to you so that anyone who may be asking for it can access it. Or I do believe that the letter may actually even be available on the DOE website. So for those who have that challenge about, opening a NICSA account because you just don't have access to connectivity or you don't have a device that can support it, they are trying to provide an in-person option as well. And that's going to start on Monday during the weekdays from the hours of 9 to 5.
Okay, thank you, Paulette. Okay, something else that so we can vote through my students account, and the voting is through May 1st through 11th. And Selenia, you had all those details on how they can vote that we had no idea on. So if they don't have a device, they can call 311. Is that right?
Yeah. So I had made like a post on Instagram since like most of my campaigning has been on social media. So like I had created, well, you can't see it. Like how to vote for your CCSC and CEC Education Council members. So pretty much like who can vote for these candidates or a parent of a student of the DOE with an IEP for CCSC who receives special education services, and also one child equals one vote. So if you have three children and they each have an IEP, that's one vote per child. So you can vote three times. And
Okay.
for your like for the district, it's obviously the parent of the student of within that district. And also um same thing, only one vote per eligible student may be casted. The initial way to vote is through the NYCSA application. And if they don't, they can register and they have to obtain the account creation code from their school. But other ways that you can also cast your ballot is parents who do not have internet access may arrange to use a computer at their school or district office. They can also call 311 for information on available locations to obtain public computer access. And also, paper ballots will also be available at the superintendent offices. They will be able to establish an account for you, and then they'll enter the parents' vote on their behalf. Um, you know, of course, I like was pushing out for them for parents to make the account online, just because it's good for them too, so they can keep track of their child's records. Um, and from what was said before, with the special education, there are a lot of things that could be added onto your child's IEP that could really help you that they don't really tell you about. Like there's parent IEP members that pretty much these are people that I completed the training myself, an IEP parent member training, which is you learn the ins and outs of an IEP, you know how to read them and everything like that, and not so much that you're advocating for the parent when they're in the meeting, but it's just like there for like moral support. You're just there just to feel the room for them, read the parent. These meetings can be overwhelming and intimidating. There's a lot of terminology and a lot of lingo and a lot of things that are being told to you. And the majority of the time, these parents are hearing a diagnosis of their child for the first time. So that alone is difficult because, you know, I sobbed at my IEP meeting. I was crying. I don't remember anything that was told to me. And I didn't, and that is my personal like issue because of how mental health was stigmatized like when I was growing up. But, nobody ever wants to hear that your child needs services because they are having a difficult time. But in reality, I want parents to feel that like having an IEP is like the golden ticket. Like this is like one step further into knowing that your kid's gonna, you know, have a better chance to excel academically in school. So, there's the parent meetings that you can ask for, transportation services that your child qualifies for, the parent IEP member that can assist you during any meetings. If you ever need a moment where you can, like you feel too overwhelmed, you can step outside with your parent member and you just talk to your parent member and they give you, their opinion and have you, address how you feel and everything like that. And it gives you a moment of clarity and a moment to breathe when you're going back in there and then you have, six people in a room with you trying to talk to you about services that your kid needs when you're still dwelling on the fact that they even need it. And just like how Tamara said, like, my kid's going to be good because as his mother, I know that I'm going to do whatever I have to do to make sure he gets. But that's when I started feeling empathetic for the parents that literally let the school just guide them. And it's going to be minimal effort that they're going to give because and I'm not trying to like undermine the DOE because there are people in the DOE that really care about these kids, but I think the ratio of the people that are in it for, the administrative parts of it, the financial parts of it, and, just having, I guess you can say like the clout of being, considered someone with power within the Department of Education, like they shouldn't be there because it's just going to drag everyone else down, and it's going to drag through into this ripple effect because if you think about it, touching back with homeless students being stigmatized, having mental health issues. The majority of these students are Black and brown students. And then the highest rate of suicide amongst children are Black girls and boys. So that ripple, and it keeps going, and people don't realize how much their education and their academics and how they are within their peers, because school is not only for academics, it's also for to build their persona, to have build their communication skills. And that's why I want to also try to like address that schools should start focusing more on like community driven things, programs and stuff like that, teach kids, especially kids within special education. There are children that are nonverbal, and then they're placed in ICT classrooms. And, that's, like, they're here. Oh, we're thinking about the child. We want the child to be in an environment where it's inclusive. Yes, but you're not thinking about the other kids that are in that room that are gonna pinpoint the fact that one of their peers doesn't speak at all. So let's educate the kids in the classroom about these, certain students that, have a harder time communicating or are overstimulated by too much sound, too much light, too much noise. Like, I feel like the accommodations given within an IEP, yes, it's individualized, but they need to start accommodating on a grand spectrum, because then it's going to help kids that have these IEPs actually feel more comfortable. And the reason why I'm really passionate about it was because when I started the IEP process with my son fought me to not do it. I didn't get my oldest son, he's 10 years old. He has ADHD and he has an IEP in school. And when I went, I said, I want him to have, emotional support services, counseling, and, whatever else, double time for testing, body breaks, everything. And when I went in that meeting, it was because I was going out of my way, like, researching and everything. And, like, thank God, I have a good friend that is a teacher, a special ed teacher in the DOE too. So she was, like, giving me pointers and everything. And it's like, I was lucky to have that. But then now I'm sitting here and I'm like, wow, so there's a lot of kids out here that need way more than what my son needs and are not getting it.
And are not, and
yeah.
also the issue is that they're not being educated about it.
Mm-hmm.
So it almost seems like you mentioned, there's DOE employees that truly care about our children, but there are others that don't do anything for our children, right? And it's easier for them not to do anything than actually do something. And it's pretty much up to us to get the resources for our children and to help other parents get the resources for our children. So in order for that for us to stop that cycle, we need to start really getting more involved and start listening to um, listening to CC meetings to see who's really there for your child, to start holding these people accountable, to start holding principals accountable, because all that is important to stopping this cycle and to start making our schools more equitable.
And also, like, trying to actually educate the entire school community about what inclusion really is. Because, it's not like a child is brought into a classroom and it's like, oh, I have an IEP, so I have certain things that I do, or that I, special support that I receive. Like, touching back on how my son felt, like, kind of afraid to get one because he thought he was going to be judged. And that's why I feel like it's important that, even schools starting to, like, acknowledge and, like, celebrate neurodiversity rather than always it being considered as, like, a problem. Like, I don't like when people refer to these, as disabilities. They're able-bodied. They just have different ways of retaining information, giving out information. They just need a little more assistance than others because every child's brain is wired differently. And I feel that all of the kids that, considered neurotypical kids, they're never going to understand that because they're not living through it. But we should teach, like, there should be autism awareness days in schools. There should be, days where these children are celebrated. So then the children within special education, they feel included in their school body. And then the kids around these children actually can, support their peers.
Yeah,
And
Selenia, and that's something
yeah,
as a PTA president I was working for, and having like celebrations and having autism awareness, so that families can learn that, you know, these children, like you said, don't have disabilities. It's because once you start educating people, they start seeing things differently, right? Because sometimes they don't get it, they don't understand. So in order for these families to start working together, they need to better understand the needs of all families, so we can better work and we can better understand one another. And I think, like you mentioned, growing up, all these things were almost like we didn't talk about it. And it's almost like we didn't talk about mental health or mental illness, and we didn't talk about children with IPs. And personally, in my culture, you know, it's like if your children had an IEP, it almost was something you didn't want to eat, you were embarrassed about, and you didn't want to say it. So therefore, you weren't getting the right help for your children because you were embarrassed about it. And by educating our families, we have to start by teaching them that the stigma has to stop in order to get the right services.
And I
All
think
yeah,
right.
it's important.
it's
Oh,
true.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Paulette.
I was just going to say, I think it's also important that we have that discussion at a district level, because when we have these conversations about going back into the buildings in September, how are we going to keep it a safe environment, not only health wise, not only in terms of like keeping contagion down, but how are we going to make sure that these environments are safe environments for our children to say, I am autistic and I don't want to be, like, I don't want to feel like I'm different. I want to acknowledge that Black Lives Matter. Is this a safe school for me to talk about that? Is this a safe environment for me to talk about the fact that I'm looking, I have questions about my identity. Is this a safe space for me to support our LGBTQ youth? Is it a safe space for us to acknowledge, like systemic racism? Like we need to have those discussions at the district level with our superintendents, the district leaders. But that's why it's so important for our parents to come out and vote for our CEC members, so that these candidates that will eventually sit on these councils can initiate those conversations with the district and explain to our district leadership what it's going to take for our families to feel safe. What is it that we want to see? Because that change has to happen systemically in our system. And if it's going to differ district to district, well, this is where it starts. And this is where the parents can actually have a choice in crafting that narrative.
Tamara, I had a question for you. You're in CC20, and it's no secret that our CC has issues in working together, right? So, how are you prepared to work with other members that do not have the same ideas that you do?
I have no problem working with people that don't agree with me. It's called being married. But you know what I mean? But the thing is, I actually welcome somebody that doesn't agree with me, because I feel that finding out why they don't and getting their perspective can actually help you understand where they're coming from. You know what I mean? So it might help you think on a different level that you weren't thinking of before. So, and I think that's why it's very important to have these conversations, because I don't, nobody likes to somebody to agree with them every time. It's, first of all, it's boring, it's annoying, and you never know if they're going to be truthful. You know what I mean? And I'd rather you say that you don't agree with me and be honest about it than say, yeah, I agree, and turn around later and talk about like, what she said was wrong. I don't know why. You know what I mean? So I welcome the conversation, and I think it's imperative that we have those conversations, because we all need to know where everybody's coming from in order to find a solution that works for everybody. That's the whole point of having people from different cultures and different races and like different, like genders, because you need to understand where everybody is, because you want them to feel like everybody has a voice at the table. And unfortunately, I do not feel like, there are, our CEC represents me. And I don't feel a lot of times that they voice how I feel as a parent. You know what I mean? Because I am, just in case you didn't know, I am a brown and black girl. So I there's struggles and there's things in my life that I've gone through that somebody that's not of my culture, that's not of my race, may not be able to understand. You know what I mean? But I don't want you to belittle my experience because you feel that what you're saying and your beliefs matter more than mine's. It doesn't. It should matter equally. You just have a different perspective, and maybe if you listen to where I'm coming from, you could see and try to understand in a small smidge of a way, you know, how I feel. And that's what we need. We need different people with different perspective in order to get anything done.
And it's those uncomfortable conversations that really start the change
It does.
and starts that engagement within families. Like you
I
said,
was curious.
yeah. So like,
District 20 is PS 102
It's
in
a,
that
it's a it's
district.
a lot of them. Yeah, we've got a lot.
Yeah, because my son used to go to PS 102, and then he was in PS 102 from kindergarten to second grade, and then he ended up taking the GET test then, and then offered him a seat at the Park Slope School PS 282 in District 13. And I swear, just alone of him being in a school in Bay Ridge as Park Slope, completely different environment, completely different, like, just completely different, values and ethics that they put forth. And then it's just like, why? Like, it should literally be the same in every school. And it's strange, and I know that a big part of the actual, like the demographics of the community play a big part of it, but even then that shouldn't matter, you know and you can tell, like, okay, in Sunset Park, the majority of the kids that are in the schools are Hispanic, because Sunset Park is a heavily populated Hispanic community. And then just a few streets down, when you enter in Bay Ridge, it's completely different. There's a complete difference in diversity, but that shouldn't affect the schools at all, but it does, because I've seen it from my own child being in one district to another. Like, I personally have my opinions of when my son was in that specific school, and I'm not saying it was anything bad, but I was let down. And you know now here he is in a school in Park Slope, where a lot of people know Park Slope as being this up and coming gentrified neighborhood. So now my son has more opportunity to do things just because of the location of where his school is. That alone is like, doesn't make sense to me, but unfortunately that's how it is.
and Paulette, would you be able to like answer that? Like, why is it different per district?
I can speculate based off of my own observations and experiences. It stems from the district. The biggest difference between District 15 and District 20 is that District 15 has no screens. You do not screen your kids. It's a choice model when it comes to where you want to send your children. And G&T is treated different there, because in District 15 they recognize that children, certain children do need to be challenged, because the Common Core curriculum just doesn't challenge them, and they rethink the approach of what gifted and talented looks like in District 15. Whereas in District 20, it's all about the competition. It's all about the screens. It's all about keeping each school separate and not talking to each other and hoarding resources because unfortunately we had district leadership that encouraged that. Um, Thankfully, that particular superintendent has retired. And we have a new superintendent that we have a lot of hopes for. But that culture is still very, very prominent in
Yeah,
District
we
20.
have deep roots in that culture.
Mm-hmm.
It's like deep rooted. And
Mm-hmm.
talking as someone that, my husband's born and raised in Sunset Park. And when we had our children, we decided to stay in Sunset Park and we had the opportunity to have our child in a different district. But we decided to have our child in District 20, even though there was a lot of issues that we knew of. But we felt that in order to make a change, we had to be able to hold our schools accountable. Like if we left the district at that time, then we were doing a disservice for our community because we leave the district, our child gets a better education, it's in a better district. But what happens to the rest of the community? Then it continues to happen. So that's why we decided to stay. But sometimes I wonder if that was the right decision because, it is deep rooted. It is something that many families hear of. And I've had friends tell me, why did you stay there? They're like, they have this, and that. And I'm like, because we wanted to hold them accountable and to really start doing something for our community. To really start, we just didn't want to live here. We wanted to make change in our community. And I think that's a big difference. And by making that change is by really starting to be involved and start listening and starting getting educated on how it works. Because a lot of the times the schools will keep you blind to what's going on. And as parent leaders, sometimes our biggest roadblocks are administrations, right? So it's important to work with strong leaders in our district. And I believe that's Selenia, you're an advocate for District 13. And Tamara, I've worked personally close to you, and I cannot thank you enough for all your work. Um, you truly care about your community. You truly care about the children, about the families, and to me, it just means a lot for you to be running because it's what I needed to hear.
Thank you. It's so weird because I actually, it's been a decision many years in the making because I wasn't really sure if this is the platform that I wanted to step into. But because I'm used to just doing what I need to do without bragging about, like, I'm not a braggart kind of person. I'm not a bragging person. Like, I just I I've been fortunate enough to meet like-minded people, and we've just come up with really great ideas that we've been able to implement and just run with it, and it's become successful, and we've done great things for the school, and like Selenia, what you mentioned before, the every district is different, and I can personally say me that I've had um, great administrations that I've dealt with in this district. You know what I mean? And I think what you need to do, I think once you find your people, your support system in whatever school you're at, and that you have people that have your back that could talk you off off the ledge, and I know what I mean. I think you'll be surprised on how much you can accomplish as long as you have the knowledge. And I think that's one of the things that I've always been trying to push for. Get all the knowledge that you need before you step in a situation where you have no idea what's going to happen. you, and I've been really grateful for all the people that entered into my life at the moments that I needed them to enter. that have helped me gain the knowledge, that helped me learn more, where I feel comfortable. And it really, and it helps that my husband has my back when it comes to, and my family and my mother-in-law, my brothers, that they have my back, and they're there to support me, and they're there to make sure that, I do have what I need. And, I've tried to be that kind of support for a lot of people, because it's just hard trying to get things for your own kid, where they the things that they need, they're supposed to get. First of all, they're mandated to get, and they deserve to get it. And how dare you stop my kid from getting it? It's not your money. Mind your business, you know.
And I was thinking right now about like a lot of the children that are especially like in the lower grades. A lot of these kids, their parents are kids. So I had my son when I was 18 turning 19. And, you know, by the time he actually started school, I was 22-ish. So I was just like, hey, time to put my kid in school. He's of age. Let's go, it's time. But, and I'm not going to lie, like, it was just like something that was just had to be done. And drop off my kid, go to work. He goes to after school. I don't see him until 5 o'clock. And this was every day, every day, every day, every day. And like, I never like paid attention to certain things. And I realized when it was addressed to me by teachers and everything like that, but in a light of like, he's being disobedient or something like that. But then I sat there and I'm just thinking like, okay, but this is such a common reoccurrence in every grade that he's been in. Why hasn't it ever been that like someone came to me and say, hey, have you ever considered maybe, you know, trying to see if your son can get some services to help? And I know that sometimes people might take that as like insulting, because it's like, what are you trying to say, that like my child has a problem? Like, you know, but, and I know this might seem like too far fetched, but like, why isn't it that just like all of the children should be, monitored individually? And then if they see that there are any like parts of within a child's academic, abilities individually, then intervention, because that's what early intervention does in a sense. They when my children were born, they were born 30 weeks. Once they were discharged after being in the NICU for a month, the Department of Health sent me a letter in the mail saying, our records indicate that you have a child that was premature and they qualified to be evaluated for early intervention services, you know? And a lot of parents then all they learn about how the system kind of works, because early intervention with the IFSP is similar to the IP, process. But full-term babies who are completely fine, reach developmental milestones with no issues whatsoever, but then within that transition from early childhood into school age, there's things that just that come up then. But it's
But I
never
think
gonna, yeah.
But I think part of the issue also is the overcrowdedness, right? Like some of our
Hmm.
children, like teachers don't get to really interact one on
I
one with
know.
children. And they have seen, like now with blended learning, it's like I've heard from teachers in my school, like it's totally different. Now they now spend time with the kids and they actually
Hmm.
can give them more of their time. So that's a big issue too in our schools, the overcrowdedness. Like, how are you going to be able to see those issues if you have like 30 kids in a classroom? Like, I have two kids, it's tough. Imagine 30 kids. Like I can't keep up. So I don't know how they do it. So I think that's a big issue that we also need to address in our districts, that all our schools are overcrowded. And yes, they're building these schools, but they're like, it almost seems like in District 20, our high school has over how many Tamara students? I mean,
5,000.
that's
Or could be
crazy.
like 4,000 something now that's enrolled. And, because like right now, Fort is at like 17% capacity out of like 100% of the kids. So like only 17% of the kids are in the school right
I
now.
remember when I was in high school, I used to go to Fort Hamilton, and like I'd be like this, walking in the hallways. This someone's back, and this, and we were like like
Right. And then you have to
smush.
think about how many students like actually do better in smaller schools. Like,
Oh, and I point out too, like like G&T program, right? My son, when he got into the G&T program, his classroom only had 13 kids, and then the classroom next door to him had 30.
but
You know
why
what I
can
mean?
that, yeah, but why can
Not
that be for
here.
all our schools? That's
Not
the
I
here.
problem.
know.
We had like in certain schools, like the G&T classes with the crowded classes, what they were at max capacity than the other classes.
Yeah, and in my son's school, the G&T class from first grade to fifth grade, it's the same group of kids. They go together. So my son from third grade to fifth grade now, like he's been in the same classroom with the kids that he's always been with, and that kind of like isn't fair for the other kids because like now there's like a like there's like you kind of alienated the G&T kids and they stick together, and then there's there's only 13 seats in the G&T, I think, in total for the school. So that G&T class is always 13 kids, 13 kids, and
Tamara,
then
I'm sorry, Selenia. And Tamara, I wanted to ask you, what are your thoughts on G&T? Because I know in our district there's some concerns about.
Yeah. See, the funny thing is, because a lot of my main advocacy has been for, my child that's in special education. I don't know if, with the people that know me, they know I have my other two kids. I have been in GT. That's the funny thing. Is like they just think I'm just for special education. No, I'm for equity for all kids. Like if you're gonna do if you're gonna do GT, then it should be equal for everybody, plain and simple. Okay, it should be you know any kind of race in that particular program. It should be equal for every. It should be equity for everything. I don't have a problem with GT. What I have a problem with is the fact that it's not equitable. That's my problem. It's not equitable because let me tell you, I'm an immigrant. I wasn't born in this country. My main schooling has been in this country, but I didn't get up into this country until I was 8, and then I turned 9 that summer. And you know, and I think, a lot of people don't pay attention to that because they think I was born up here. But in the areas that I grew up in, like I grew up in like East New York, the Saratoga, like when I went to school, I never heard about GNT. Like I didn't hear about GNT period until I got into this neighborhood, after marrying my husband. And then my kid just got into the class because the teacher was like, how she thinks, my kid is smart and they could be, better suited in the GNT. I had no idea what it was. You know what I mean? Had no clue. So, I thought they were learning, at an accelerated pace. It depends what school your child is, because in elementary, I feel like a lot of the kids are learning at the same, pace from like elementary into middle school. It just sometimes the GNT might be a little bit accelerated. And sometimes it might not. It depends on the teacher. I feel it depends on the school. It's different for everybody. You can't. That doesn't work for every district and every school. So I don't have a problem with GT for anybody that It just needs to be equitable. And that's
Yeah, the way
not,
the way that system is set up of getting the students into the GNT program, I just feel like it didn't make sense to me. And I mean, I don't know. I still have a lot of like learning to do when it comes, more into like how statistically children are placed in specific programs and everything like that. But it's kind of obvious that it's not as it's not presented like it's presented differently than what it actually is. And because if that were because sometimes I had times where I was just like I should have just kept him in general ed because it doesn't make a difference then. But then I have moments where I'm like, maybe he he did excel more because of GNT too. But I guess because then that's me thinking like outside of my personal with my child and thinking
But
about
it's
the other kids.
but it's also about like GNT, like you said, it's 13 kids in a classroom
Mhm.
opposed to having 30 kids. So of course, any child that's in a smaller classroom is going to do better. So I think that's part of the issue. Like, why not have that for all our children? Like, why does it have to be? It almost feels like, you know, growing up, like I felt our system was segregated. And I've said it plenty of times. Like I did not feel part of it because I didn't find anyone that I can relate to. Teachers, I didn't find books in the library that I was able to relate to. And I dropped out of high school because I felt, hey, this is not for me. Like I can and you know, it's not till I went to college that I started learning more about Latin culture. And why can we have that from early on for all our children? Why does it have to be just 1 month of Black History Month, right? Why can't we just learn more about it, learn more about our culture? Because I think that's what our children need in order to feel connected.
I
And
think another.
it's definitely oh, I'm sorry. It's like
Go ahead, Violet.
I just get like so like
we'll
about
get
this.
we'll get passionate
No,
about
that's
it.
it.
Yeah.
Listen, this is why we sit on the seats and that we run for these seats because we're passionate about what our schools are offering our children, right? So the passion is well placed. But I think it's important to elevate that the way gifted and talented is seen from the DOE perspective is so skewed to how well a child tests. It's not about intelligence. It's not about ability. It's about how well they test at the age of 4. And because of whether they were prepared or whether they just happened to, out of natural talent or pure luck, happen to test well, they are designated gifted and talented. And gifts and talents look different in every child. So to say that this is the only way the DOE is going to see potential in these children and we're going to track them and segregate them and invest in them because these are considered the cream of the crop, then it's a disservice to every other child who did not test well. And it does not mean that they're any less intelligent or less able or less gifted or talented. It's just that they happen to score higher on a test than the child sitting next to them. And
Right.
that system is working exactly the way it was designed to work because it does segregate our children and it does hoard resources and it does create a workforce that is compliant, that is used to hard work, that is used to anxiety, that is used to being in a constant state of competition. And this is why we have a workforce that can't function, that don't know how to talk to people, that are acting out and can't control their emotions because it has been drilled into them that the only thing that they are there for is for accelerated learning. and that's based off of an inconsequential test.
Yes. And it continues with that stigma, right? It continues with that stigma that Black and Brown communities are not smart enough, that we're not gifted and talented because we don't see ourselves in a lot of these schools that are so-called gifted and talented. But it also has to do with, a lot of families spend a lot of money in tutoring. So what is going on with that? That's also a disparity in itself. Who
Well,
can
it's
afford?
no, it's not a mistake that the testing culture, it's a culture, it's a multi-billion-dollar business, and it's no mistake that the testing centers are funded by the same companies that create the test that the kids are taking. So, of course, if you have enough money to pay for Saturday school, private lessons, private tutoring, after school, testing support, test prep, all these test supports, it's just more money in the testing company's pocket, whether it's Pearson's, Questar, Spruce. I mean, these contracts are multi-billion-dollar contracts that the DOE continues to pay into every year. And they're the same companies that create the standardized tests for the state, for the ELA tests, for the math tests. It's all about money. And when we treat our children as commodities, we will never be able to create a functioning, sustainable society because that is not sustainable. We're human beings. We're not cogs in a machine. No matter how hard you try to make that happen. So it's like the testing culture. Yes, it's a culture. Sometimes it's related to background and as we are a very immigrant rich city that New York City is, some of us do come from a country or a culture where testing is the only way you can figure out whether you're progressing. In China, we are tested weekly on whether we are performing well. So when you have, immigrants coming in, to the U.S., to New York from China, tests are not foreign to them. This is what they were raised to believe is the only monitor of success. And if they score well, that will guarantee a pathway towards success. When there are multiple pathways, and there are multiple views of what is successful. So we as parents, we have a voice in this. We can say, no, I don't want to take these tests anymore. We did that at the PEP this year. That is why there is no G&T contract for the 4-year-olds this year. And because of that, we have an opportunity to rethink what gifted and talented actually looks like. And we shouldn't squander this opportunity.
And then the fact that it's like parent initiated too, like your kid doesn't just get put in G&T. Like it's the parent that has to go and apply to have their child tested, and then it's all parent driven at the end. And a lot of parents don't know about this, so they can have a gifted child and not even know that this specific test can help them get into a G&T program, but the child can be gifted. The child can be gifted in ways that maybe it won't reflect on that test, but then they're labeled as not, but they are. And it's just. And I had a question actually. I don't know if this is true or not, but is it true that when they decide where the kids are, which classes they are in, that they try to like blend like higher like scoring children with lower scoring children, or try to take very fluent English speaking children and mix them in classrooms with ESL students? Because I was told that my son was actually one of the kids that, like, my son was put in an ESL class even though he's not an ESL student, but because they wanted him to influence the other children to vote to become comfortable with the English language, which I respect it. That's awesome. Like I would love my child to be able to help children learn English. Yeah, but then how is that affecting my kids' academics? Because I remember there were times that my son didn't even want to do any work because he's like, I am so bored. Like all I do is have like I'm put to read to kids and stuff like. And then I was like, really? I was like, well, and I had a friend who told me that they do that, and I wasn't sure if that was true or not.
I mean, it falls under similar guidelines as an ICT class. The percentages aren't as clear as they are in an ICT class, where it's like it's up to 40% of the students in that combined class needs to be students with IEPs. Um, and normally, like that was written on based on the average that the class would be no more than 12 students with IEPs, and the rest of the students being of general education. And the way the general education side wasn't pre-selected for any particular reason. So when it's in English, an ENL or an ESL class, they do have a similar mix. It's I don't know if I've never heard of an ESL G&T class. So I'm not.
Oh,
I
it was
wouldn't.
before he was in GNP.
Oh,
Like it
okay.
was, yeah.
Okay. I mean, what you're describing is what they call the peer elevation model, and it's based off of a progressive work model. In a progressive school where it's more work based, and it's about peer to peer work environment where it's like it's a the classmates work together to elevate each other to work through various issues and various problems and this is really like a true example of you're as strong as your weakest link, right? The child who is struggling the most, the best way that you support them is going to elevate how well the rest of the class is going to do. So if it's done correctly, it's an incredibly effective model because our children do learn better from each other than they do sometimes from adults, depending on the child's temperament and mindset. It's not unusual. Um, I don't see it often though, only because it's a model that needs monitoring, right? I mean, there needs to be numerous assessments throughout the year in order to evaluate whether the model is working, whether the pairings are working, whether they need to shift one child from a different table to another table in order to try to see if they can come up with a better chemistry or a better a combination. So it tends to be more labor intensive for
But with a
those
class
classroom
of 30
teachers.
students and one teacher, I mean, how could they really?
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, when the model is done correctly, it works very, very well. But 9 times out of 10, it's not because of challenges like class size, because of challenges like training, because of challenges like bias. It's like how many times have our children who are coming in without a lick of English treated differently because of the fact that they don't speak English. Even in an ESL class where it's like that particular teacher is trained and supposed to help them ease into the barriers within the language obstacles, yet they will come in with their own biases because depending on like the country that the kid came from or the color of his or her skin or the behaviors, whether that child can sit still or not. So it's like these are all the different challenges that can prevent a work progressive model from being effective. But it's something that we see in every school because children need schools and we need more buildings and we don't have them, and these classrooms are bulging at 30, 32, 35, you know um, at a very, very young age where this is where the executive functions happen. This is where like learning styles are created, and if we are not in an environment that will support that, we're actually working at a deficit from the start.
And something that I have learned through my journey as a parent leader and just in general as a parent, is that you cannot fight alone. If you want to make a change, you have to have your support group. And that's why it's so important to have the right CC members representing you, to have the right PTA leaders representing you, because it all has to do in working together. You can't do it alone. As strong as we can be, we cannot do it alone. And we just need the right support, and we need to get to start getting our people. Like, we're not everyone's going to like us, or not everyone's going to have our views, but we need to start learning on who our like-minded and who are our people to fight this fight, right? Because I remember when I was a new mom, and I thought those baby years were tough. And I had another mom tell me, wait till they go to school. I'm like, oh, that's going to be easier. Like, they're going to go to school. It is tougher. It is so much tougher. And, the fight just continues now. So, again, you have to vote tomorrow, May 1st through the 11th. Really start listening to who's going to represent you so you can vote for them. That way they can represent you, your school, and the issues that you are encountering. And Tamara, I'm just going to end this really quickly because all good things have to come to an end, right? I love chatting with you all, and I think we should get together and keep this conversation going. But Tamara, why should they vote for you?
Um, because I'm gonna do the work, because I'm gonna put in I'm determined. I'm gonna speak for everybody. I'm gonna contact the parents. I'm gonna contact the school. I'm gonna go to the meetings. Because I'm gonna show up. Because at the end of the day, you want somebody to show up and represent you and let people know these are your issues. Okay. And I have solutions that I think we could use. If you want to add on to my solutions, great. If we could, work around it, great. But I can't stand when, people bring you issues and then they don't have no solutions to help you resolve the issues. So I've been doing this work for years, and I have ideas. I have a support team. I'm gonna listen. I'm gonna advocate for you. I don't have to agree with everybody who I'm advocating for, but I have to believe in what you believe. You see what I'm saying? And I'm gonna show up, and you're gonna guaranteed you're gonna get a solution, and you're gonna get a response. And when you contact me, I'm gonna be there. That's all I
And
can
now,
say.
Selenia, District 13, why should they vote for you?
Because I just I know how it like I just feel it I just know how it feels like just getting to that point where you're just like, what am I supposed to do? Like so confusing. Certain things that it takes when, having a kid go starting school, and then when they sorry.
The struggle is real. Don't you worry about
Okay.
it. We all been
That's
there.
fine. Literally, that's how I feel. Like, she just described why. I'm like, like, because there's like so much that needs improvement with the education system as a whole. And I know that's like impossible to resolve in a day, but I feel that these are the seeds that like spark the fire to like get it going, because like to have like-minded people, a village come together, work and build that bridge to end these gaps in between administration and schools, parents, like, having more support for the teachers, because these teachers really go through it. And, and yes, like in all things, there's always a yin and yang. There's always people who are in it for the money and people who are in it for, personal gain. And then there's people that are truly there being selfless humans trying to make change. And we just need like restoration of the education. Like, it just needs to be clean, control alt delete, and let's restart this program over again, please, because because it's just because if like as me and Tamara, like we're advocates for our, like we're all advocates for our kids, right? And if and I think that I feel like I could navigate things. I'm the type of person that likes to look for loopholes or try to look for like alternate ways to like do certain things. And there are so many parents out there that I know that first step is scary, and then that's when they back away. And then that's the ripple effect again. Then down the line, when everyone's wondering why is there such a high statistic in minority students failing their citywide state testing, maybe it's because there were a lot of things that administration didn't address in the beginning. So I'm just trying to like get in there. Like I want to see also because like I'm gonna learn so much more than what I've already know, like just being a parent, like because then I can piece things together from a parent's perspective and then from like a political perspective, I guess you can say, and put it together. And it's like, okay, now we can find ways to fix these issues that I've experienced as a single parent in a broader spectrum. So, that's why like these seats are important. And the fact that this is the first year that parents can actually vote for these seats, it's a big deal. And I want to, like, regardless if they vote for me or for anyone, like, to show the DOE that, like, parents want to say something. So if this turnout tomorrow is huge, like, and parents get in there and vote, I feel like it's going to make the DOE be like, oh, parents are concerned. Maybe we
Right.
should start listening to them more.
And there's the power numbers, right? So
Mm-hmm.
if they start, and the parents' voice is so important because I've had teachers reach out to me and they're like, if you say it, it's different because you're a parent, right? So we need to start learning our power as parents, no matter whether you're undocumented, no matter if you're an immigrant, no matter if you don't speak the language, your voice matters. As a parent, you can make a difference, and you start by making a difference by electing the right people and by holding them accountable. Because if we work together, there are so many things that we can achieve. Like, I just think about all the things that we can do together, and I'm like, why are we like even here? Like, we should just all work together and get this done. So the way we're going to work together is by voting for the right people, and that's tomorrow, May 1st through the 11th. And Tamara Stern for District 20, and Selenia Diaz for District 13. Thank you, everyone. Paulette, thank you for joining us. I mean, it's always so nice to be with a bunch of strong leaders. I'm so happy to share this space with you guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. I
Great stuff.
appreciate it.
All right. Thank you.
Education warriors,
Oh,
man, every
and
single
pause for a
one.
minute.
Yay. Bye.
Bye.